Yeah,
It should
just,
automatically just kick right over to the right one.
it says it's doing it. I don't know if anyone can check YouTube for me real quick.
It says excellent condition right now.
I'm on YouTube. I can check it. It's going.
Awesome.
Yep.
I don't know if it needs desktop audio or not. Oh, it's counting down.
I can see it using.
I just muted it in OBS, so yeah. I think so. It just blipped at 8, which it normally does, and otherwise it should be fine. So, whatever you want to do. I mean, I think it should be okay. Yes. Yes, I am. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay. Yeah, that sounds fine. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Programming what for it? What's not going to happen, Ben? Oh, Calamaris. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, they shouldn't even be hearing me, which... Oh, I know. That's because I muted you, and I thought I would be muted as well, but... Sorry, everybody. Oh, no, I wasn't profane or anything, I just... Oh, yeah, I guess. Well, we've got 10 seconds, so I'm going to switch it over here and Just a few. All right. We're going to just have to see if we are live on YouTube. We can go from there. Once we get confirmation, since I haven't done this in such a long time, I'm sure it doesn't show. Yeah. We can go from
Hey,
there.
looks like we're live, Eric.
Yeah. We get confirmation. All right. I just checked. Hooray. All right. Well, welcome one and all. I will be hosting this evening. Unfortunately, Mr. Nate is not feeling very well. And you know that for someone like Nate, that means that he's genuinely not feeling well, because you know he'd love to be here if he could. He had asked earlier if anyone wanted to be the guinea pig, take over the stream for him. And I said yes, because I like Nate and I like you guys. And I'm glad that I could facilitate the stream and we can all get together. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the usual intro, and then we'll go from there. Welcome to the Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show, we will have a talk about a Linux project, such as a Linux distribution, a desktop environment, or application. We also chat about the news or any variety of topics from the community. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. I am not Nate. I am not a fitness and vintage tech enthusiast, and I do not have an unhealthy obsession with the OpenSUSE project. But Nate has all those things, and a lot of our panelists do as well. So how's everybody doing tonight?
Doing
good.
well. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, very well, and thank you much, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very awesome.
Happy to be here. Happy to do it. So we're going to do a news flight tonight. Just kind of cover some new stuff. And you know what I've noticed recently, we do our best to, Nate does his best to come up with show topics and stuff. And then we collectively tend to dismantle all that and just come up with whatever we want to discuss. So it wouldn't surprise me if we ended up doing that tonight. But you know what? It makes for some really good content, I think. So, yeah. So let's start with what people have been doing in tech or Linux, and see if anybody has anything they want to share over the last week or couple weeks, or if you haven't been on the show before, anything that you're bringing and interested in, anything you want to promote, anything, whatever people have been up to. What do you got?
I'll go first, Eric.
Okay.
Well, this past week, I've been yet again playing around with LFS. For those who don't know what that is, something from scratch. Been enjoying it so far. I've ported some things to it, from Crux, including their package manager. Kudos to our buddy Emmett from the Venom Linux group. Or distro group, whatever. He's been a great help in, showing me different things from like his GitHub and him personally. I used his scripts to install it because I have done LFS vanilla in the past, and it's not necessarily hard, it's just tedious, long, grueling installation. And this time I felt, heck with it, I'm going to use his scripts, because normally I would have gone on and made my own, but yeah, no, that's more heck.
Is that the type of thing, Ben, that you do once and you're sort of satisfied that you know how to do it, and then you're kind of like, I'll just skip
LFS is something you do once and you're like, yeah, not going through that insanity again.
Unless there's some good reason to, right?
If I was to advise anybody about this, if you're going to do LFS, do it vanilla once, and then if you're going to do it again, just do it scripted, because I got to tell you, from personal experience and from what I've seen on YouTube, it's not worth doing it the vanilla way twice. I mean, I have seen only one person on YouTube, actually maybe a couple, who've done it more than once, and it's a pain in the rear end doing it multiple times from the traditional way. And I've seen my buddy Steve, who's got a YouTube channel called The Multiverse of Linux, and he's done it more than once on YouTube remind you of the traditional way. And I don't know how that man has kept his sanity. I fear for him.
Hey,
So yeah,
people have hobbies, and some hobbies include maybe watching code scroll
maybe
by, or
watching people build Linux from scratch. Yeah,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
I can honestly say, if I was in his shoes, I'd be insane by now.
Okay, so
But
you've
either
learned to
way,
do it
so
the
yeah,
smart way.
long story
Yeah.
short, I've got a successful LFS system. I'm hoping to make an ISO out of this, so that way not just me, but those people who want to learn it but don't want to go with all the pain of building it themselves can try this out. Now, I will say I have run LFS a couple of times before, and somehow it's always come down crash and burn. But
Hmm.
you know, I'm hoping that this install, because I've recently figured out from our good friend Dark Zero from Zero Linux, has told me in a voice chat with him on Discord that he discovered that there is a way through Etcher to actually clone your drive that doesn't involve CloneZilla or anything. So I'm going to be doing that to a trusty 1 terabyte hybrid drive. And tomorrow I'm getting a new SSD that I'm going to, NVMe SSD. It's a Samsung 980 Pro that I'm going to be sticking in here that will hopefully uh, be better than my SK Hynix that I have right now. Because unfortunately, from what I've been told, SK Hynix doesn't play very well with Linux. I don't know the validity on that, but regardless, I will be doing that with my dad tomorrow. So hopefully that'll go well, and I'll be back up and running. So
Steve
yeah,
is on. Steve is Zero Linux, right?
yeah.
And he's on Linux Cast, right? He's on the Linux Cast. I think I've heard him talk about.
He has been a couple of times, yes.
Yeah, I think I've heard him talk about his. So that's actually interesting. If you guys have ever heard the Linux Cast, he's on there and he talks
I've
about,
heard the Linux cast a
yeah,
couple
Zero
times.
Linux.
I'm actually friends with him, as a matter of fact.
Nice, nice.
But yeah, hopefully we'll be having a respin of LFS for us to check out very soon.
Okay.
Hey, Swift.
Well, thanks for contributing. Colin, I saw that you were unmuted. Did you have something to, or just want to say hello, good day, whatever it is you've. Oh, you went
What
right
was
in.
I?
I
Sorry?
don't know. You were unmuted. I thought, hey, you were ready to say something. I wasn't sure.
Oh no, sometimes I just forget to press the mute button. So
Well, how are you
I
anyway?
actually, yeah, good. Yep,
Good.
can't complain.
Good.
Yep. I was typing, so I hit the mute button.
Gotcha.
That's
I
why.
appreciate it. All right, Magnus,
No
did you have
worries.
something?
Well, I spend a lot of time just doing robotics. I have
Nice.
several BeagleBones and Raspberry Pis, and I recently got an Orange Pi 5,
Okay.
and I put a GNOME desktop. I think it is an Arch desktop they have out of the box on the Orange Pi website, and man,
And it
that
was
thing
able to do
runs.
that, huh?
Yeah, I put an SSD on it, NVMe SSD, and damn, that thing performs pretty well. It's almost like a desktop.
That's impressive. I don't think I've talked to anyone that has an Orange Pi. That's neat. So what are you using it for then?
Well, it's supposed to be used for robotics as well.
Okay.
So it was just kind of experimenting with that thing. But I figured I found out that the default kernel they have doesn't have Wi-Fi drivers for some reason,
Oh.
and you only have one NVMe port on it, and it doesn't have an onboard Wi-Fi driver. I want to connect to it with Wi-Fi, and so either I gotta choose to put a Wi-Fi dongle in it that has a driver. They have it. They have it. I tried to compile some Wi-Fi drivers just for some USB dongles that I have. I have some of those cheap ones you can buy that has good support for Linux, but unfortunately they're not supported, and well, that's what I'm working on at the moment.
So what are you using the robotics for? Is it educational? Is it recreational or?
Yeah, recreational. That's
Okay.
my own kind of projects, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So
And what are you trying to just solve a problem, or is it just cool to play with, or like?
yeah, I wanted to like I had this idea that I wanted to build a robot where you could jump into it with VR glasses.
Oh, okay.
So you put on some VR glasses, and I wanted to put on cameras on the VR glasses that could monitor your hand movement, and then so you could kind of control the robot from afar.
That's cool.
So So the first robot I built is like a Segway kind of thing where it balances on two wheels.
Oh, neat.
And I just want to put on some simple arm gadgets, and so you could drive around with it and lift up stuff, that kind of stuff.
That sure beats anything I've been doing by like 10 miles. I mean, I do the most inane, like, oh, I'll just check out another distro. Like, here you are building robots. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's really fun. You should try it, because when you get into actually interacting with the real world, electronics and that kind of stuff is so much fun.
Yeah, I could imagine there's a whole set of challenges of trying to come up with, just putting the systems together, but then trying to solve, like, how do you get the signal, the latency good enough, and like how do you get the signal, to where it makes sense when you're looking at it, and position of the cameras, I'm sure, matters. And a big
thing is like signal to noise. Like when you connect something, a sensor or something, you always have like lots of trouble with noise and that kind of stuff. Like when you get into the real world, these things become a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
So other than that, I've been fascinated with so many things that begin to go on Wayland. So I've been trying out the KDE 6 with Wayland and Cinnamon 6 with Wayland. Just trying out some distros that are experimenting with Wayland. It is so cool.
So 6 has got to be they're at a feature freeze right now, so it's got to be getting kind of roughed in at least.
KDE 6 or Cinnamon 6?
KDE 6.
Yeah, I think they're in beta now. And I mean, they have like a plan set out, and they expect to be done this spring, I think, which is cool. So yeah.
I just recently started using Wayland myself, and I expected a lot more friction, and honestly, day-to-day things are very well put together. And I think I keep hearing people say, like, someone was just mentioning that Zoom is so much better on Wayland now than even just, I guess, recently.
Yeah. Well, I haven't updated, so maybe I should try to update it. Because I had to do the thing with the views. It didn't react on the mouse when I clicked on the views. So I think might just have an old Zoom version.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it seems like that's what really is happening now, is that maybe the heaviest lifting or the biggest challenges have been kind of at least been pushed pretty far, advanced pretty far. Now you're starting to see specific applications, and I really haven't run into anything, honestly, and not that I've been trying to break it, but it does happen from time to time. So that's great. So you haven't run into any major issues or anything
with Wayland?
Yeah,
I've been on Wayland for more than a year on Fedora, so it works perfect for me. And most of the things, I have workarounds for stuff that doesn't work on Wayland.
Yeah.
So I haven't logged into X11 for a lot. I can't even remember when I logged into X11.
Wow.
It's so rare that I have to.
What about the Cinnamon version? How's that going?
I mean, it looks. It looks. To be honest, it looks like it has less bugs than KDE 6 has. So that's really. I was really impressed with it, because with the impressions, I just installed some programs and dabbled a little bit around with it, and I thought it was working really well. So yeah,
that's amazing.
Probably no surprises there. KDE has a lot of moving parts, doesn't it? I noticed that when I was building KDE from Easy Archer, and I was trying to get all the stuff that I wanted personally on my build. It's just so much different to everything else.
Yeah, but they also switching to Qt6 now, so they have the extra burden of also upgrading the toolkit. So
okay,
that's a lot of work in that.
True that. Yeah, true.
Sean, you have your hand raised?
Because
with
the impression
just as a side note,
all the stuff
I saw
that I
that
wanted
Mint
personally on my
21.3,
build.
which
It's
should
just so
be
much different
featuring
to everything else.
Cinnamon 6
Yeah,
is
but
due
they're
out
also
this month.
switching
So
to Qt6 now.
it's really
So they
close at this point.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel like, and I know I feel like a broken record when I say this, but it really feels like there's momentum now that there just wasn't before. Um, you know, it's not like it's a surprise to anyone that Wayland exists, or that, you know, any of these things have been being worked on for many years, or that, hey, X is dying, we're not supporting it, bad things are going to happen, you know. Um, and it's just surprising to me to see that there's this sort of mind share that has happened where people, even myself, I had nothing against Wayland, but I just wasn't, I don't know, I just didn't have any real interest in it. And now all of a sudden I've tried it and I've thought, okay, yeah, I see the benefits. I see that it does, you know, perform better and seems to be lighter on resources, and, you know, is accomplishing a lot of technical, getting rid of a lot of technical debt that we've had with X. And, you know, seems like I said, we're closer than further away at this point. And the fact that people seem to be putting more effort in, it's like anything. The more people that are using it, the more feedback they're going to get, the more that feeds in, and it's a, you know, virtuous cycle. So
yeah,
excellent.
That's it for me.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Anyone else? Oh, don't be shy. I know you guys are busy doing all kinds of cool stuff, right? No?
I ain't doing nothing.
Fine. Be that way. All right. Well, we can go into the straw poll then, if we would like to do that. Let's see. This week was, what is the highest resolution of all the monitors you own and use constantly? And Eris, would you like to cover that, or would you like me to?
Sure. So when I made this poll, I made it in sort of like a reflection about how Wayland is better at high density monitors, and usually a lot of people who use Linux have a lot of older equipment maybe. So I just wanted to see if that was true, or if people were using more high resolution monitors now. So that's what the intention of this poll. So the number one answer for this poll is, let me refresh, 1080p, 50% of the vote. 1440p, 19% of the vote. 4K, 19% of the vote. 9%, 720p. And Tuxpan got 3%.
Thank goodness.
I did get a couple responses.
Okay.
For the poll, and one of them was specifically 1080p, 16 by 10, so 1920 by 1200. LOL, because it's not a standard 1080p.
I have something very similar with that. The tablet PC, the Latitude. It's actually 1920 by 1260 or something really strange. It's not 1610. It's actually a 4:3, but it's an unusual resolution. So anyway.
So and somebody else said, "What about phone screens though?" Question mark, thinking emoji. And I just said at that time, so many resolutions there. Not sure if a poll is feasible. Too many options makes it difficult for one person voting to make a selection. Sometimes this results in people choosing other instead of choosing one of the options available. This has happened in the past. So this alters the final distribution of votes. So I'm not sure if a poll just on phone resolutions is possible. Also, I'm not sure if people actually know their phone's resolution. That may be another problem.
Yeah.
And Nate left a response here, actually. I have a framework which is 2256 by 1504, but my desktop has 1440p. I probably use my framework more lately, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Gotcha. Well,
I'd
go ahead, John.
I had a funny situation recently. I had my when I buy something online, sometimes it sends you to your bank to do like a confirmation or whatever. And I got sent to this confirmation screen, and I was on my laptop instead of my desktop, which had a different resolution. So I set I plugged my laptop into my desktop's monitor, and then made it the only monitor, so it was the same resolution. And then attempted the checkout again, and then it worked. So evidently, I'm assuming my bank was checking my screen resolution with an iframe as I was performing this checkout to see whether or not I need to take extra steps. So I thought it would be a funny kind of fuzzy security, I guess, if you set your screen resolution to something really weird every time you go to a checkout, so your bank only like lets you through without extra security unless you have this weird obscure resolution. So yeah, anyway, I found that funny.
I think it's interesting that if you ever do attempt that, let us know. I know that in terms of like browser fingerprinting, cookies, obviously people focus on that, and if you're logged in or if identifiable information, but screen size is relevant as well. Not only screen size, but window size. And so there's a couple of different ways that they can use that as they're gathering that information through the browser, obviously, in your case. And then, must have some kind of a check in there, which is pretty crazy.
What amazes me is that in Chromium and Firefox, they block different portions of this, but both of them do reveal quite a lot. And it is screen resolution where the window is on the screen, the viewport size, which is sort of the inner box where you see the website, and the outer window size, meaning from that you can extrapolate even things like how wide somebody's window decoration borders are. Like it's really like weird, and obviously the size of the window itself. It just seems like an excessive amount of information that you would never need to know in order to render an actual website properly.
Yeah.
All you need to know is the viewport size. So
yeah,
I have no idea why it's that much information is being reported, but apparently both browsers are happily giving away most of that. So
yeah, and I'm a dead mark for this because I use my browser in a very specific size where I leave strips on the bottom and the right hand side, so that I can quickly click back to like a text editor and then back to like, so I can, that's basically it. So I can click back and forth. I want to give my browser as much screen real estate as possible, but then have the ability to click around it if I need to. And that means that that window is always the same size, and it's always a weird size. So whoever is tracking me knows exactly who I am because, my window is almost always that same size. So. Yeah.
I recently got a 4K monitor, and man, that's a lot of space you have on your screen now.
Yeah.
So I installed the Pop OS tiling thing for GNOME,
okay.
and that works really well. Although it messes up the layouts whenever a new window comes up. So I had to kind of choose which windows are tiled and which ones are not. So Zoom, for example, I don't want that to go into tiling.
Right.
And that's a bit of setup. You basically have to go through almost all your apps, make sure they don't. It would be better if they could make it so that you choose which windows you want to be able to tile, and then all other windows are
the other way,
just normally
instead of it being you pick the ones you want to float. Yeah, I gotcha.
But generally, like when you have such a big screen, I think I feel like the tiling stuff just works a lot better than the floating. But one thing I was wondering about with the survey was, what if you have one of those ultra wide monitors with 1440 height and 4K width?
So
someone they could pick other.
So in the poll itself, I did add a little description. Says if you have an ultra wide, just go with the second number. So if the display is 120 by 1440, just go with 1440p. Because otherwise we would get so many different results. And at the end, we would have to like add them up and
it would be
the
list would be endless. Yeah.
So one of the things that I immediately thought of whenever you start getting into 1440p and 4K, especially on a smaller screen like a laptop, is scaling. And that's definitely something that Wayland has helped me with. Instead of needing to try to change font sizes or zooming in and out, or, just trying to make it so that you can see everything, but not, the scaling options were 100% and 200%. Well, 100% was too small and 200 was like ridiculous. So, without the fractional scaling and having that ability to do that, cleanly. And it's been nice to have the ability in Wayland to just very easily switch between those things. And I don't know. So Magnus, you have a 4K monitor, and I know other people do as well. Does anyone actually use it at native resolution, or are you scaling it?
I use it at native resolution, and it's a 32-inch, so it's rather huge. So, but actually that's really nice for development, like, because normally when you're doing programming and this likes. Then you'd like to have your development environment on one side, and you have the app on the other side. And maybe you even also want a browser window with either Google or ChatGPT helping you out with your stuff. And so just a lot of space helps.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could either do the one big monitor, or you can do several smaller ones, and it's
right.
I'm kind of a one big monitor person myself. I think it just makes more sense, but I can see the merit of constraining something to a specific screen instead of trying to divide up. Like you're saying, you use a tiling add-on. If you didn't have something that worked well for you, then separate screens sometimes makes that easier. So any thoughts on monitors? Adam showed me a 500 megahertz monitor today.
Yeah, 500 hertz. Yeah.
Or hertz, yeah.
It's a Alienware monitor.
That's crazy.
It's 20. I think it's 25-inch, 1080p, 500 hertz. Yeah.
Think about how many pixels it has to move every second. Was it a 1080 or was it?
1080p, 500 hertz, IPS. Yeah.
That's
insane. I think it was like $500. Yeah.
That's 2 million pixels, 500 times per second.
Yeah.
That is crazy. That's like 1 billion pixels per second. You basically have to move all the time.
Yeah, I mean it would be for like esports stuff, so you'd have like a pretty high end, GPU with some esports stuff.
But can you really see the difference?
I think for the average gamer, I think like 240 is probably the most you're really gonna feel for most people. 144 and 165 are pretty much good for 90%. But this monitor is not for the everyday person. This is for like an esports athlete kind of person, right? Like this is for somebody who, they can feel the difference between 0.1 and 0.5 milliseconds of latency. It's a totally different type of person who needs that, right?
Yeah.
But it's there's always the e-peen thing too. Look at
mine is 60 hertz, and that's fine for me.
Nah, man. Once I got a high refresh rate monitor, 60 just feels so just juddery and awful.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay.
Is there a certain amount of it? Go ahead, Alfred.
Oh, I was just going to ask Adam, do you know the specification of connector or connection you need for that?
Yeah,
it's like there's HDMI 2.0 and
like DisplayPort for that speed.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, because I've been looking at specs and like 500. Wow.
I'm pretty sure part of that's probably an overclock on the monitor. It's probably something like 480 or something like that natively, and then like there's an overclock to the rest, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Interesting.
I wonder.
And it's got a G-Sync module in it too, so it has the better variable refresh rate. So it's the hardware module inside the monitor rather than software driven.
Does that get to a point where there's a certain refresh rate that it's almost like too much, like and kind of be a
Again, I
negative thing?
I think it's a diminishing return for most people.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, the type of people who would use that monitor have such crazy reflexes that they probably, you know,
Yeah.
they have like the visual acuity and the mental quickness to notice the difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, you know, if any one of us tried to fly a fighter jet, you know, we'd have a hard
Right,
time, right? But
Formula
somebody
One
who's
car. Yeah.
right, exactly. But somebody who's like physically designed for that, I guess, you know,
Yeah.
physically like meant for that, then they'd be like,
So
"What are you talking about? It's not that fast," you know.
I just did the calculation. So a 1920 by 1080 screen with 500 frames per second does 4 gigabytes per second just to move the pixels onto the screen. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like 4,000 megabytes per second just moving pixels alone. That is
Yeah,
crazy.
there's a wacky monitor.
Yeah, and if you have anything that's just software rendered, like if you render GNOME only software rendered, imagine just the CPU has to move all those pixels out there.
Right.
Yeah.
That is
For all
just
you
amazing.
XFCE people out there, your Pentium 3
Yeah.
just won't cut it anymore. Just
No. Now you basically have to, like, the future kind of determines that you have to do GPU rendering of everything, like all the toolkits, everything, widgets, because it's just too much to do with the CPU.
gonna have a 4090 to draw your desktop.
Yeah, right. It's definitely a specialist thing, no doubt. But Adam's right. I think, you know, even on mobile devices, you're starting to see higher refresh rates just become standard, and I think people, like you said, once you have that experience on a regular basis, it's difficult to go backward. You really start to notice it. Yeah.
And like, I mean, I can play like lower frame rate game, like a 30 FPS game, but it's switching between the two really quickly. That's what throws you off. It's like if I boot up a game that's like 30 FPS on like a console and I play the whole thing at 30 FPS, it's no big deal. But if I like switch it to the 60 FPS mode and then try to switch back, then I'm like, oh, this feels awful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the same thing with like PC stuff. Because sometimes, you know, like I start a game, for example, and it's like defaulting to 60 hertz. And I'm like, oh no, we're not doing that, you know? And just that kind of thing, right? Because 60 is fine, but 60 feels slow when you're so used to 120, 144, etc.
Yeah. So outside of gaming and then just wanting extra real estate, I mean, is anyone looking at new monitors outside of that context, other than, like, for me, I have one. I honestly don't even know the specs on it. I'm sure it's old enough that it's not anything special refresh rate wise. It's 25 something resolution, and it's plenty big enough for me to sit in front of and have tons of, you know, space on the screen, and unless it died, I really don't have any reason to replace it. And so it's interesting to talk about monitors because unless it's come like a laptop, inherently you're getting a new monitor, right? When you get a new laptop, you know, if you get an iMac.
I only replaced mine because the buttons died on the panel.
Okay.
Yeah. So I couldn't change the.
I was actually looking to upgrade probably into this year to one, because the one I have is not bad. It's a 1440p 144, but like it's not great. It's like, I don't know, it was like mid-range.
You use that
5 years
extra
ago.
performance, whereas like,
well, yeah.
I mean, if I got that refresh rate for the things I do, I wouldn't even notice.
Oh, even just I'm telling you, man, just dragging windows around,
really?
It feels so like you
Would I
got
just
the
sit
you got
there?
the Pixel 7 Pro, right? Like
Yeah.
that's got a 90 hertz screen on
Right,
it. Did you enable 90 hertz or?
Yeah.
Okay, so then like take an old phone, like someone else's 60 hertz phone, and you'll feel it, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference. And like even just interacting with a desktop, it's like you just feel it's more connected because there's less latency, less input latency, that kind of thing, and everything, even just normally using the machine, feels more connected.
I could see being in front of the monitor just dragging windows around. Oh, so smooth.
Oh, yeah. So here's the other part. This is related to Linux. If you have a high refresh rate monitor, that has hid all of the warts of GNOME and other desktops having stuttery mess of a compositor. And then like when you go to 60 hertz and you're just like, oh, it actually is pretty awful. Like it is juddery, it is stuttery. But like when you're running at 144, it's like so many frames happening at a time. It's like even if they do skip, they're so short, you know?
Yeah.
Like the frame time is so short that you don't even notice the skip frame. But then when you go to lower frame rate and the frames it persist longer per time, you start to notice them. And so yeah, if you if you need a better performing desktop compositor, just get a different monitor, I guess.
So I think an interesting follow up to this poll would be: are you a single monitor or multi monitor person? And if it is multi monitors, then how many? Because I know some people like Nate have, I don't know, 4, 6. Who knows?
It's gotta be 3.
Yeah,
two's like the most, but I prefer just one.
Okay, see that, and I think people have very definite opinions about, and a lot of it is born out of a workflow, out of a need, for that extra space, or just mentally, sort of how you use a computer. And I, just for convenience sake, I'm more of a single monitor 1080p. That's kind of just works for me. But there were times when I was at work where I had access to multiple monitors, and so I would set them up and I would use them. So I mean, I was an opportunist.
I generally also a single monitor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe
we had that.
Go ahead. We did.
So we had that poll like over a year ago.
Okay.
And I can read the answers since we're talking about
that.
Yeah,
if you don't mind.
The number one answer was 1 non-ultra wide, 39%. 2 non-ultra wide, 35%. 1 ultra wide, 13%. Other 13%, and that was it.
Oh, okay.
I think it depends on how much you want to be mobile, because I have an ultra wide and I'm literally going to sell it to get 3 monitors. And if you can get like really thin ones, you can potentially take them wherever you need to go. Interesting bit of extra information. I got some 1440p monitors off AliExpress, and that's a really cool way of doing it if you want to get really exquisite monitors on the cheap, because you can get something that you might ordinarily have to buy a gaming laptop to get. You can get them on Ali, because all of these laptops use generic name brands. So they're all Lite-On or Samsung. It doesn't matter if you're getting an Alienware or a Dell or whatever. They're all using LCDs that come from these mass manufacturers. So you can get them pretty cheap, although where it gets a little complicated is you got to get controllers for them. They tend to be generic, but a problem I ran into.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's just a panel, and then you get the controller with them.
Gotcha.
You can generally, they encourage you to message to ask if your LCD will work. Invariably, it almost always will, as long as the amount of pins are correct. If you're getting a 4K panel, you're going to need a special controller, so you be careful with that. But if it's like 1440p and below, you're pretty much good to go with almost anything. A problem I ran into is I got 1440p at 120 hertz, and it would appear that my laptop can't drive that and my desktop can't drive that with a version of its HDMI. It just gives no signal. And a way that you can get around that is you can buy at least if you're using HDMI, it also does USB-C, which is useful if you want to just plug it into your phone. But a way to get around that is you can get something called a dummy HDMI plug, or dummy HDMI pass-through. They're also called EDID, dummy HDMI plugs.
Yes.
I don't know what the exact name of it is, but you can get one that is, say, in my case, specifically 1440p at 60 hertz. And that way I can plug that in, and then as far as my desktop or laptop is concerned, that's what's being plugged in. And if I then plug the LCD into that, it's going to drive the LCD with 60 hertz instead of 120, which thankfully these panels happen to be willing to accept, and then they turn on. So you can, if I'm using these panels with ports that can only handle 60 hertz at 1440p, I can use the dummy. If they have like HDMI 2.0, then I could just plug it straight in and it'll work. So that's a little life hack to get you around that problem if you're buying custom panels.
Cool. You're getting into like sign maker territory or something where you can get a bunch of panels and make a wall.
Yeah, they're cheap. Like, they're unbelievably cheap in comparison to what you'd have to pay normally to get them. I'm working on making a cyber deck, but like something that is practical, like something you'd want to use instead of a laptop, kind of practical. So that's what all this is for. So we'll see how that comes together. It's going to be a slow process. There's going to be a lot of things to figure out. So anyway, that's the first one.
Nice.
Are you going to show it off somewhere, like how you did, what you did, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's going to be. I'm going to make sure to open source the entire process, start to finish. If anybody wants to copy what I've done, I want to make sure that they're very easily able to do that. I want to use as few special tools as possible. So ideally, all you will need is a drill, a hacksaw, and I think that's it.
Nice.
Yeah, maybe a drill and a hacksaw, maybe some tape. I'm not sure, but
that's cool.
You're not gonna make like a YouTube video on it or something to kind of show it?
Yeah, I'm not really much of a YouTuber.
Right.
I'll take pictures. I'll put it up in a blog and see it comes together. It's probably gonna take a year or two, so there's plenty of time. But yeah,
it
should be fun.
I did a website this year for a company that does audiovisual stuff of all different kinds, and they work on like major like civic centers and like big projects, but they build these video walls. And he was showing me some of these pictures, and it's just like the all like you're saying, the drivers and the panels and like and how they wire it all together, and like the bezels are so small that the panels are like literally butted up against each other, and then the further back you get from it, the less you can even see the lines, and it's just this giant wall. And because these panels are so good now, the refresh rate and the color saturation and the brightness, and like it's just so striking to see this on the side of a building or inside of a convention center, or all the different places that they do this stuff. And yeah, it's just like really cool stuff, but very specialized stuff too. Like you're saying, you have to have a certain, I don't think I'm going to be getting any just panels soon, but I get that you can do that and do a lot of really interesting things with it if you're willing to take the time to figure it out.
I'll post the links in YouTube of what I got so everybody can see it. But,
okay.
Yeah. It can take a little bit of trial and error.
Cool. All right. Well, so Offnick's like way off in a different direction than a lot of us, but any other thoughts on monitors before we move on? No. Well, someone had talked, and just to throw in the retro for just a second. I think it might have been here last week, but could have been somewhere else, where we were talking about CRT monitors and needing to understand refresh rates and stuff like that, so that you didn't blow up your monitor. And I can remember definitely back in the day needing to manually configure all that stuff and getting a number wrong and not quite blowing it up, but hearing some intense coil whine and like real close. But yeah, I think
I think we got into those weeds last week. Yeah.
That's what I was saying. I it's amazing to think like we've come so far with all this stuff, and the idea that $500 for a 500 hertz refresh.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's nothing. What was the Apple Studio display not that long ago? Like, it wasn't even a big screen.
Just the stand was $1,000.
Right. Exactly. So I think we'll hopefully moved on from some of that. So
yeah.
Anyway. All right. Well, thank you, Eris, for another excellent poll and talking point. I always enjoy those, and it's always, I can sort of guess ahead of time where it's going to go, but I definitely have some surprises, but this one I figured 1080p was going to still be. I didn't think it would be 50%, but it wasn't surprising. So anyway, all right. Well, the purpose of tonight, or the main event for tonight, I guess, is News Flight, and it's really mainly just about things that have piqued your interest in Linux and the new events, current events, things that maybe don't get covered as well as you would like to see them, that you'd like to bring up here, or something that you're really excited about, or just anything essentially news related, but obviously, as I've mentioned, we don't have to be that strict about it. So if there's other things you would like to talk about, we can cover that too. But before I jump into some of the stuff that Nate has here, is there anything in particular newsworthy that anyone wanted to bring up?
I just thought it was interesting that Valve finally has Linux, their Steam survey. They finally have the Linux users take over the Mac users. So it seems like finally it's paying off, all the work they put into SteamOS and Linux gaming.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think, and I haven't seen one, but apparently the Steam Deck is really quite a success. And the fact that so many people have chosen to leave Linux on it and are happy with the experience that they get from Plasma, and that they just introduced a new model that's supposedly has HDR and is an even better device. That's an incredible success.
OLED screen. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. OLED.
Yep.
Beautiful. And it's supposed to be much better battery or something like
It
that?
is. They changed the processor ever so slightly, and so it should yield better battery times and stuff, because it doesn't need to use as much, CPU power and whatnot. So
yeah. Fantastic. Does
So
anyone
that's
have? Go ahead.
that's the fourth news story from the other news section.
Skipping ahead, you are.
Wait, what did I miss?
No, the what Magnus mentioned, the Steam survey. That's the fourth news story in the other news section. So
it is. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
No, you're good.
It's okay.
No, we're just gonna talk about it since.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, and since you brought it up, so the November results are out tonight, and it shows a 0.52% gain up to 1.91%. Still not to the recent July high, but reverses the trend of Linux declining on a percentage basis. In the months that saw Linux market share declining, marked big rises in Windows 10 use and the Chinese language support, both of which tending to indicate large influx of Chinese users. Okay. That's interesting. So we think that was something they weren't allowed to have access to before, and now they do? Or why do you think there would be a big rise?
Isn't just people having more access to that? Coming online. Not everybody in China has access to it.
Yeah, the Great Firewall's over there. Yeah.
Yeah. So not just people that already were online and couldn't access it, but even just new users, new people getting on computers.
People who have access to a better standard of living, pretty much, I guess.
Got it.
I think it was more to do with just economic conditions. I mean, China has always been fluctuating in the Steam surveys. I mean, for the longest time, Chinese has always been the largest language, most popular language in the Steam surveys. So there's plenty of Chinese gamers, but I think the month-to-month change is just based on economic conditions.
Got it. Okay. And, and a small percentage change in a country the size of China can be literally millions and millions of users. So, yeah. Diving down into the Linux. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Sorry for the delay there. So last week we had one of the most memorable days of the year. We had the drop of NixOS 23.11. So that has happened. Yay.
And explain for a non-Nix person why that's a special day.
Well, it's a new version. Hey.
Okay.
New.
I actually run the unstable version of NixOS, which is kind of like running a rolling distro, and it works for me. So, but yeah, they just dropped the 2311. There was a bit of a hiccup last time or last drop where it was delayed for a couple of weeks, but this time they got it out on time. And another thing I actually had posted, I think in Telegram, was that there was already work being done on bringing the Cosmic desktop over to NixOS, which I found rather interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's obviously in heavy development and not generally available, but they are making apparently great progress. There is one YouTuber, and I cannot think of his name right now, that does demonstrate new updates as they come out, which has been interesting to watch. Um, yeah, I am definitely very curious to see what comes of System 76's Cosmic desktop. Um, I don't know how much of a departure it's going to be from things we've already seen. I think maybe it's just going to be the taking those pieces and rearranging them and putting back together. And I would say Pop! OS has that ability to, like, Magnus mentioned the tiling manager, and they've sort of come up with some interesting GNOME extensions to change defaults, and they've created their own dock and all of these sort of things. So they leaned heavily into that customization to begin with, but now that they're sort of writing their own, and from what I've seen, it looks a lot like there will be plenty of customization, but they're not taking it to a ridiculous degree. And so I think it's probably going to be a comfortable experience for a lot of people, because they'll be right in the middle of where it's enough to satisfy people who want customization, but not so much that it's like, okay, this is too much. So, Eris, go ahead.
So some of the things for the NixOS release,
Mm-hmm.
just to highlight that since we talked about that. With this new release, GNOME 45, it comes on board for NixOS, the stable version, and there's also support for Wi-Fi 6, 802.11ax, WPA3, SAE, PK, and this release is an effort of over 2,100 contributors.
Wow, that's amazing. So when NixOS has a new generally available release, does that also mean that the package manager then benefits as well, so that you don't have to just be on the release? I assume so, because that's
Yeah. So you will have to update. As far as I understand, you have to update your config file to get the new release.
Okay.
It's not automatic.
Gotcha.
Unless you're on the unstable version, in which case the unstable branch is rolled over to the new unstable branch, and you just keep on getting the new hotness, right? So
you said you're running unstable?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you haven't seen any issues with instability?
Like I said, it's kind of like running a rolling release, but more stable, which is kind of counterintuitive for an unstable version. But with the way that NixOS packages are delivered, there are no external dependencies. So if a package compiles, it has declared all of its dependencies successfully. It can't be like missing one and just assume it's on your system.
Okay.
Which is like really a cool thing. That a build can't break. It doesn't mean it doesn't have bugs, but everything will have a bug at
Well,
some point.
there's going to be upstream bugs that until someone
Yeah.
finds it. Yeah. So
Yeah. But as far as it, like building and actually launching and running and not having, oh, we couldn't find this package.
yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was getting that on a what's that Ubuntu rolling Rhino.
A rolling Rhino.
Rolling
Yes.
Rhino. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not have a good experience on Rhino. Not knocking them. I'm just that's exactly what I ran into, where it was like, well, you're pulling from the development repo, and yeah, that dependency's not there, and so well, not gonna work. And the only answer I could get out of it was, so don't use that. I thought solid reasoning there. Can't argue with that.
Yeah, or just wait for it to get fixed, I guess, is
Sure,
the other
sure.
thing too. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a pull a pull request that'll fix that, and it'll be merged in eventually. So
Yeah, right, exactly.
So with Rolling Rhino, you're in the development branch.
Yeah.
In Arch, you're not in the development branch. You're in the stable Arch branch. Now you could argue this, it might not be stable, but that is the stable branch for Arch that you're on.
Right.
And so there's a big difference there. Rolling doesn't exactly mean rolling everywhere.
Yeah, there is a testing branch for Arch too, and if you really want to get into the same issues, probably.
If you're bored, if you really are just tired
Sure.
of that whole stable desktop thing, okay, cool. Well, all right. Happy Nix Day then, for those of you that are interested in Nix. It's definitely something I keep meaning to look at and just never seem to get time. So,
and I would certainly like us to just like dive into that one week and just like say, here's our experience with Nix.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I would like to see.
Sorry, Nate.
Yeah, you should have been here. No. When we do that, it would be great if we had someone that would be. See, I think I would want you or someone else who was kind of used to using it and was comfortable with it, to give a good sort of well-rounded synopsis of like what it means to you, why it's interesting to you, why you use it, how you use it, how it's benefited you, versus a cursory sort of 1 week look of like, I would probably install it, play around with it a little bit, and not really get deep enough into it. So I think it would be a good mix if we had you and others that maybe would dig a little deeper, and then the rest of us kind of, if we have the time to look at it. But
we could like transition to like a multiple week rollout of distro explorations, which will give us more time theoretically. I'm using the air quotes there, theoretically.
Well, it could always be, yeah, where we kick it off 1 week and then the next week is actually something else, but that other thing's still happening in the background. Yeah, I mean, that's possible as well, multiple threads. Yeah, we'll tear everything down and rebuild a new new Saloon. Nate will come back, everything's like in shambles. That'll teach you. Anyway, all right. So he did have a couple stories in here. I'm gonna run through. The first thing he had was slimmer options, but lean in a new live environment. Galileo has arrived, and this is EndeavourOS. I'd say the single biggest change is if you've run Endeavor and launched into their live session, it was XFCE forever. And now they've switched to Plasma, actually, which is kind of wild. I hadn't read the release notes, and I just downloaded the ISO and started it, and I thought, what did I do? Why is this in Plasma? And their explanation is to make development and maintenance easier for the team, we've switched to KDE Plasma instead of XFCE due to a more native experience for our developers with the Calamares installer, which is Qt based. This only affects the live environment and the offline install options. When choosing the online install option, XFCE is still there as an option to choose from. For those who would like the XFCE theming we created, this option will still be available after installation through the Welcome app. Our community edition Sway Qtile BSPWM, OpenBox, and Worm aren't available anymore through the Calamares installer. Unfortunately, most of the original devs left the project, and there's nobody who picked it up from them to make them work with each Calamares update. For a while, the core dev, the team picked up the work, but we had to make this decision in order for the project to go forward. The community editions are still available, installing them manually, though, through this GitHub page, and then they have links for that. Other improvements: local hostname resolution will be enabled on a new install. When Lux encryption with system deboot is chosen, the system will be installed with a stronger Lux 2 encryption using Argon 2 ID. This is a encryption protocol resistant to GPU password cracking. Interesting. From now on, only one DE or window manager option can be installed within the Calamares installer to prevent issues regarding conflicting packages after installation. EFI partition permissions made more strict to avoid issues, especially with dual boot installations with Windows. So I don't know if there's any fans of Endeavor here. Brian, one of the creators, is someone that I've known for years, and I've helped a couple times with some web issues. And when I run Arch, this is usually the way I do it, because Endeavor, really outside of changing sort of the desktop themes, the default desktop session, there's a repository for their specific helper apps, but otherwise it's just vanilla Arch and then whatever desktop, so it's essentially a really fancy way of installing a mostly stock Arch experience. And they've given you access through the online installer to pick the desktops that you want and all that stuff, and also some other packages, and just a really sort of great utility distro, I would say. Is anyone interested in? Go ahead.
Oh, so this was a community suggestion. This is the first news story.
Mm-hmm.
It was suggested in Discord.
Okay.
And I think, I guess maybe what they're trying to get us to say is this like a big loss for XFCE? This is one of the premier XFCE desktop distros. Other ones, of course, are like MX, Manjaro, but meaning almost everything defaults to GNOME and I guess Plasma. So this will be another distro that doesn't do that anymore. It defaults to XFCE.
Well, I guess you could say that at least it's not GNOME, right? I mean, if that's the argument that, and I don't disagree, that I think a lot of distros just sort of default to GNOME because, of the same reasons that the others do. But, and Plasma definitely has always been one of those, well, it can do everything that GNOME does, and why isn't it more of a popular choice? I mean, XFCE, I think.
So they still have MX Linux, right?
Yeah, MX. Manjaro still uses it as their main.
Manjaro,
yeah. So I mean, it's definitely
Don't
still
forget
out there.
Ubuntu.
Mint has an XFCE version. I think XFCE, Linux Lite. There are lots of excellent XFCE experiences out there.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, I don't know how many people really ran the stock default XFCE environment from Endeavor. I mean, maybe they did.
I ran it.
Did you? Okay.
Some time ago. It's been a while actually since I was on Endeavor. I had it on my laptop.
So I would say
nice.
Out of anyone using Calamares, they tend to do some really interesting things with inserting extra functionality. Now, Manjaro comes to mind because they have the option preference or the office preference. So after you're installing or you get to the last page, they ask you which version of an office do you want to have, none, LibreOffice or FreeOffice, which is kind of neat, And then Endeavor, obviously because of their online installer, allowing you to choose the desktop that you want, along with some of the other things like printing support and stuff like that. But then they also have interesting things like, they just added in this release, instead of the options for swap used to be no swap, swap no hibernate, swap with hibernate, and now they have swap file as another option. So if you'd rather run it as a file instead of a dedicated partition, sure, why not? What else did they have in there? I just had it and I lost it. But yeah, they tend to do some really interesting things around Calamares. And I think because, again, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but because in a lot of ways it's a glorified installer for Arch, or it's more or less a stepping stone, right? There's not a lot in Endeavor outside of the simple sort of helper apps that you're doing after the install. It's much more sort of mainline Arch at that point. So anyway, their installation experience, I think, is pretty great because of that focus. And so I guess them switching to Plasma made it easier for them to continue that work. So I guess that makes sense. They're a very small team. The fact that they've perpetuated and been able to continue to not only put out new releases but support the community, and it's really pretty impressive that they've continued. So
personally, I think this is great that they're consolidating. They're not going overboard with what they're trying to maintain and everything.
Yeah,
and that seems like very a good long-term decision.
Right, they're willing to make tough decisions in order to. And if you think about where they came from, a lot of them came from, oh, geez, how can I not remember the distro?
Antergos.
Antergos, yeah. You're right. And that was, so the precursor, and a lot of these guys came from that community. So it's the spiritual successor, more or less. And I think one of the reasons that they had so many problems is that they just had every desktop and window manager you can imagine. And it was just a lot to maintain, and too much, spread themselves too thin. And so I like this as well. They kind of just say, we've lost the people that were willing to do the work. So we can't take all this on ourselves. And therefore, now that's actually an invitation. So if you would really like to have Sway be in the installer, then great, go maintain Sway. So it is in open source. All right. Other news, Wayland takes the wheel as Red Hat bids farewell to X.org. This is from the Register. A blog post by Carlos Soriano Sanchez, head of the GPU team at RHEL, spells out news that doesn't come as a big surprise. The next version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, expected in 2025, will drop Xorg and will provide only a Wayland display server. As RHEL only offers GNOME, that means it will only offer the Mutter compositor and nothing else. One of the problems with how Wayland works is that each window manager must implement the profile for itself in its own code base. Wayland is just a protocol, not a display server. There's no direct one-to-one match between Wayland's components and those of X11-based system. But the point is that there's no central shared Wayland server for desktops to share and work together on. The closest thing to a display server in a Wayland session is the compositor, and that's much like the window manager under X11. Almost every desktop environment has its own, and very few share them with other environments. So I don't see this as being a surprise in the slightest. I think this goes back to what we were saying earlier, that there's really a lot of momentum and impetus behind pushing Wayland and getting that out. Fedora has been a huge champion of that for many releases now. And by the time we get to RHEL, this next release, by then I'm imagining Wayland is going to be pretty rock solid by then, especially if they can figure out what's the pain point. Remote desktop access is still kind of iffy, or is it even impossible? I don't know. And I hear that pretty routinely from people where it's like, well, that's the problem I have with Wayland, is I have a workflow that requires me to have remote access, and it's just not supported, or maybe well supported. So
they have RTP support in GNOME, and then there's WaveNC, So, but I mean, it's still buggy. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things that if you rely on it, it's got to be solid. So I kind of get that. But
Yeah.
okay. I'm just reading these off. So if anyone has any thoughts on them, please just jump in. And plus, I'm not looking at the meeting, so just tell me to shut up if I'm.
I have a question.
Go.
Does anybody know of a way to get global mouse position in Wayland? Whether that's WL roots or something else? Because that's been a real issue for me, because I know like any change breaks somebody's workflow, but the way that I do tiling is I have a bash script that checks for the global position of the mouse and then tiles the currently focused window to where the mouse is within a grid. But I can't do that on Wayland because I can't get global mouse position. So if
Something
anybody
tells me
knows how
that
to
might
do
be
that,
by design.
yeah, it's supposed to be like insecure or something
Yeah.
in some way. I'm not smart enough to understand, but
Yeah, I get the sense that that type of stuff is exactly one of the things that they hated about X, and that the security model of that type of information being available between applications is really something they've designed out of it, on purpose. So I don't know. It's a great question. What's in charge
There
of
must
drawing
be
the
a way though,
mouse?
because
Yeah.
well, I'm going to say there must be a way to be able to get that. I know we haven't gotten to this yet, but one of the things that got fixed this week in Plasma was that fixed. I say a feature enhancement really. They are doing like the shake the mouse thing, and it's supposed to make it,
Oh,
like your
yeah.
pointer bigger, like
Yeah.
it does on Mac OS,
It's
right?
an accessibility
And
thing.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so there must be a way to be able to, find out where it is so that it can do those types of things. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Maybe it's even a secret there, and it's like, well, if you shake it, we don't know where it is, but it'll get bigger. So
Yeah, maybe that's all they're doing. Maybe it's nothing to do with positioning, but I
yeah,
feel like it must have some bearing.
yeah, yeah. I have to imagine that because there is something drawing that
Yeah,
pointer, and it's tracking the location of the mouse and drawing that on the screen, something has to be able to, to pull. You have to be able to pull that out of there somehow.
right. Yeah, and like you said, it's supposed to be secure in design so that not every application can pull that out, but there are ways to tie those types of things together so that, there must be something to do
Yeah.
that.
Actually,
Well, I'm
I'm
also kind of
go ahead.
sorry.
No,
I'm also kind of curious as to how Wayland actually affects uh, smaller projects, such as some of the window managers and smaller desktop or distributions that they just can't tackle the port over to Wayland without any kind of supplemental funding. Um, that that kind of uh, experience of having that choice where you want something really niche, uh, kind of is in jeopardy of going away.
I think it because Wayland pushes certain aspects of the application. Let's see the best way to say this. So because they're now responsible for the way that the application is interacting with uh, the the compositor and the display server, um, rather than having a generic sort of, you could just account on the system doing those things for you. Like it adds a certain amount of overhead, from what I understand, and so I can imagine for smaller teams, they're now going to have a certain level of expertise of like, well, how does that work, and how do I, But I have to imagine that as that becomes more and more standard, like that's just the way that desktop applications work, that you just take it you just assume you have to do that. Like now we see it as an additional step, right? Or more work. Whereas that work was really just being pushed off to someone else. Now it's, and from what I understand also, like this is a better situation because I remember for years, app developers saying, no, I don't like themes. I don't like when the system's able to change the structure of my application with different, colors and borders. And like, I designed it to look this way and it's supposed to function this way. And the fact that you can come in and just retheme something, I don't like that. Like, I want to be able to control. So the whole idea of client-side decorations and, the app developer has much greater control over how that stuff is implemented and how it's presented to the user. So they don't get, because you have to figure, like, they were getting a lot of requests for, well, it doesn't look right on my screen. Well, okay, well, there's so many technical details I need to know about you before I can even help you, versus if I'm giving you something that is already sort of, this is exactly the way I built it and that's the way you're seeing it, I can eliminate a lot of that question about, well, where's the problem? I don't know if that was a good answer or not, or if anyone has a better one.
Well, I think mainly it is kind of a question of like some of the choices going away. Like I said, window managers are, most of the window managers is still like very dependent on X11.
Yeah.
And getting them over to Wayland is kind of a big deal, at least from their resource perspective.
Yeah.
And maybe in this process, we'll kind of lose some choice over time.
And I think that's maybe also where a compatibility layer can help. I mean, isn't that, again, I need to learn more to understand better about how these things work, but X Wayland, I think, kind of gives you some ability to lean on X Wayland instead of needing to be fully Wayland compliant. I guess I don't quite understand how that fits in.
As I understand it, yes, but like I said, some of these projects are really small and they just don't have the resources to put into getting, or at least, they may be small. They may be like, this is our vision and that's it. We have stopped active development. It's just like bug fixes, or security fixes at this point. And how does that affect the Linux desktop experience as a whole, which is, like all about choice.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely see it as a negative towards choice and openness, but I think that's part of the reason that X was such a problem, was that because it was all things to all people and it had a very open spec and there was very little sort of control over, I don't know. Because for a long time I thought, okay, well, Wayland is intentionally being difficult or is intentionally difficult to use because it doesn't take a one-to-one approach for what X did in terms of the way that it handles, all of these different requests and compositing and window managers and all this stuff. And it was just inherently more open. And unfortunately, I guess that is a big enough problem that, the decision was made that in Wayland, no, everything was going to be separate on purpose. And this idea that everything had access to everything was a problem. And so we're going to solve that problem by just not taking that approach, which then necessitated pushing those things back into, upstream to the developers. I guess.
Yeah, but that doesn't really explain why they didn't make a portal for say keyboard shortcuts.
I don't disagree.
They
and actually,
they should have done that.
I hope that, because I was actually. It's funny that you mentioned that because that's exactly what I'm looking up right now. the desktop portals, because I keep hearing, well, what, portals will help, solve this, solve that. and you're right. So if in fact portals are the way that you can address some of these, let's just call them shortcomings, uh, why don't they exist? Or maybe they're being worked on and they're not ready. I don't know. I don't know.
It's been so long. It's kind of confusing actually because like why isn't it there? And it's the same thing with color correction as well.
It has been a long time, but it's also been a long time where it was a lot of thought exercise. Not a lot of people were actually using it, and so that idea of like what is really the priority here in terms of the overall spectrum of Linux use, desktop Linux use, and what is it that the overall population of people using this need? You just can't get feedback in the way that you need to make these types of decisions in a vacuum, especially when you can't get any kind of meaningful telemetry data from people because they won't give it to you, or they're not going to answer surveys, or you have to get that information from people in some meaningful way. And the meaningful way, unfortunately, is we're going to put this out there, and then people are going to give us bug reports to say that this isn't working and that isn't working and that isn't working. It's kind of backwards. You'd hope that, when you're gathering requirements that you'd be able to have better information, but that's the situation that I think they're in. And so now that, yes, it's a problem that color correction isn't there, or it's a problem that global shortcuts don't work, or it's a problem that any of these things don't work the way that they have under a different system, then maybe now you will see those portals come to fruition, or the resources, that were not there before. Now, maybe they will be. Maybe that £1 million or €1 million grant that GNOME just got translates into better Wayland support for stuff. Who knows? Hopefully.
I put in an issue on their GitLab about like the fact that my keylogger stopped working, and I wasn't very happy about that. And they just closed my thing.
Well, listen, we'll build a portal for your keylogger.
That's right. I want that XDG desktop dash keylogger. Give it to me.
Well, no, it's supposed to be something sneaky, right? You have to come up with a better name than that.
No. You got to hide in plain sight.
It can't really be a keylogger. They wouldn't be that.
Right. It's got to be some foreign word or something. They just didn't translate it. Yeah.
It has to be Danish.
Adam,
right. Yeah.
Adam, I value
put the little slash through the O, and it's all hidden right there.
Adam, I just want to say that I value your contributions as always.
Look, man, I've said my piece about Wayland. That's why I'm just cracking jokes. And the esoterica of the world, I get it. Like, people have their random edge cases, but most people don't. And Wayland's fine. It's been fine for a long time, and it's okay, people. You'll be all right.
And I've found that out firsthand, and I think we're going to see that happen. Some of these changes just need to be made, right? And as unpopular as that may be, particularly to a small subset of users, it's just the way the world works sometimes. So anyway, all right. Firefox offers devs for nightly beta and developer edition. This is from hacks.mozilla.org. You'll get better performance thanks to our advanced compiler-based optimizations. You will receive the latest updates as fast as possible because the deb is integrated into Firefox's release process. You'll get hardened binaries with all the security flags enabled during compilation. You can continue browsing after upgrading the package, meaning you can restart Firefox at your convenience to get the latest version. So it's not going to tell me you need to restart to continue using Firefox? Is that what they're saying? I think this is good. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of so I think what's cool about this is it lets Firefox have direct control of their software that gets in front of the user. It's not handing off the source code to a distro that then packages it and does what they want to do with it. This is Firefox and Mozilla just saying, here you go. This is the way it's supposed to be according to us. We built it. So I think
I would imagine the work they did on like the snap, because they officially maintain the snap of Firefox. I would imagine the work that they did on that and like kind of the refinement of the process of building it probably helped a lot with producing these debs and kind of getting it as a sort of first-class Mozilla product rather than, like you said, a kind of proxy product through the distro, right?
Yeah. But you don't see this as a little bit of a, hey, Canonical, you've made this decision to have Snap be your distribution choice, and we're saying, well, no, here's a deb that you could use instead.
I don't think this has anything to do with Ubuntu. I think this has to do with all of the other distros that use debs and not Ubuntu, because they maintain the Snap. What do they care?
Yeah.
Like they already have their official Snap that they build. They're just like, we'll build Snap for Ubuntu, and here's the deb for everyone else. And if you're on RPM or Arch, good luck and roll out.
When Ubuntu switched over to Snap, Canonical stated that it was Mozilla's idea to transfer over the control of the application to Mozilla as a Snap.
Right.
Okay.
And it's advantageous because they just had to build it once, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is the case, but I wouldn't be too surprised if the Mozilla deb is just statically linked stuff. Hence their update process and all that. It's probably a more, and I don't know specifically, but I would imagine it's a more automated way of doing the old tar GZ kind of install, right?
Yeah.
That they would, they have their own update mechanism and everything that would go along with it.
Right. I mean, it's a boon to me because I don't want to use the Snap if I can help it. It's just, I'm not choosing a battle or trying to like make a political statement. It's the way I like to run a system. And it just gives me the choice to do it without having to resort to the Flatpak, which I also don't like. So I would rather run my browser as a native package. Containerization be damned. I don't care. I want that browser to have access to to more than it probably should. It just works better that way for me. So, okay, great. Well, hey, good for them. Does anyone know if they're doing this for Thunderbird as well, or is this just Firefox?
I think it's just Firefox. I don't know how much. I mean, a different developing crew that does Thunderbird, right?
Good point.
It's kind of separated a little bit in that regard. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
It may be in the works. Maybe something on the horizon. It only recently has Thunderbird gotten Flatpak availability, and that's with the latest Supernova release. So,
got it. All right. Firefox is giving Android users a sneak peek at its open extensions. This is from Android Police. Mozilla is bringing back extensions for Firefox on Android, which were removed in 2020 for security reasons and interface overhaul. I have a hard time with that statement because I'm using Firefox on Android with extensions and have been for a long time, so I don't understand what they mean by that. I use Dark Reader and uBlock.
It's a very limited amount of extensions that are
out. There's only a handful,
Okay.
And the popular ones obviously are there.
Gotcha. So then I just happen to be lucky enough to the ones I want were there. Okay. Firefox, it's a weird statement to say it that way then, but whatever. Firefox extensions will officially be available on Android on December 14th with a dedicated extension page now available in preview to help users discover new content. Firefox will be the only major Android browser supporting an open extension ecosystem, allowing users to create and explore new extensions for the browser. Does anyone use Firefox on Android? Do they?
I do. Oh,
okay.
Dan should go first.
No.
Oh, I'm just saying yes. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Mine's not as on topic, but I'm interested what they mean by an open ecosystem. Something that's always bugged me about Firefox is if you want to create your own extensions, you have to get them signed, which means I believe you need a Mozilla account in order to do that. There used to be ways around that. I think you'd get like the nightly or the beta version, and it would let you put them in and have them stay there without having to reinstall them every time you open Firefox. But they've really clamped down on being able to write your own custom ones, and that's not a problem I have with Chromium. So yeah.
I think that
I
could
prefer
be.
and there's no way to turn it off in the configuration either. I really would like to see a way to turn that
So
off.
you can't like side load is basically what you're saying.
You can, but as soon as you restart the browser, yeah, you
Oh,
have to reinstall. Yeah, so
gotcha.
it's like, yeah, it's not practical.
Gotcha. Yeah, who knows? It could be a technical limitation of something in their systems that makes it difficult to accept non-authenticated. Who knows?
Well, I'll
You know?
make the argument for them. I mean, this is the argument they gave, which is they don't want people making malicious extensions like and getting people to install them. I suppose that they're, as a central authority, can't revoke when they find out about it.
Yeah.
So there's an argument for that. I don't see why it cannot be a configuration that, say, comes with a warning, like, if you dig into the configuration and then, it's like, hey, you're going to be vulnerable if you turn this off and stuff like
I
that. But,
I would say the only argument there would be if you could then flip on that that configuration option and then install it without someone's knowledge, then that still kind of
true.
Leaves an open.
Who watches the Watchmen?
Yeah. I don't disagree, but I do think that yes, you can definitely lean on that excuse of, well, someone might abuse this as a way to, manipulate opinion or change the narrative in a certain way. But I honestly do think for a browser, like, people do so many sensitive things in browsers that if there's a extension, and we've seen it before where a popular extension that's already in use gets sold, and then a new developer comes on and starts doing some weird stuff with it, and all of a sudden it's like,
right.
Yeah, this isn't
Dude,
the same. Yeah.
The amount of people that use, I mean, I myself included, but the amount of people that use Dark Reader, I just figure, like, if Dark Reader ever goes under,
Yeah.
we're all done.
Yeah. Well, I did buy. I don't even have iOS, but I still bought the iOS license just to support them because I'm like, if Dark Reader goes under, I'm in big trouble because there's no real great alternative. So I just hope they're not vacuuming up like all of the browsing data in the background, which for all I know they might be. It doesn't seem like it. I mean, it doesn't seem like the developer that's behind it is interested in kind of taking advantage of that position. But it's so big now that, I'm sure he's brought on lots of help and stuff. So anyway, okay, well, Firefox on Android for me is just not a great experience, so I don't really use it very often. It's just kind of slow. I'm a much happier with Vivaldi, and the reason being is that there's a built-in dark mode for web pages just built into Vivaldi, so I don't have to have an extension, as well as all of the blocking stuff, trackers, ads, and all that. So it's sort of a one-stop thing where you just install Vivaldi, configure it a certain way, and forget about it. And yeah, Firefox. I have all of them installed, and I will use them for different purposes. But my day-to-day is Vivaldi and Firefox. That's just mainly because I don't like the UI of Firefox compared to Vivaldi. It's just kind of a dumb arrangement to me. And then, yeah, the need for extensions and just the speed is like literally half as fast. So anyway, but I could see this being a very positive thing if you had a very specific use case where, like, this extension made your life easier, or if, I don't know, you're using some service where having the extension makes it a better experience, or I don't know. But it's cool. It's anything that makes Firefox more compelling and interesting to people is always a good thing. So, all right. Steam, well, we went over the Steam Linux market share. Cinnamon 6 desktop with initial Wayland support we touched on. We didn't go through the story, so I'll just read on the high points here, even though we've heard from Magnus that it's a good experience. So this is from 9 to 5 Linux. The experimental Wayland session, included in the Cinnamon 6.0 desktop environment, will be available with the upcoming Linux Mint 21.3 Virginia release, due out near the Christmas holidays. You'll be able to choose between Cinnamon X11 and Cinnamon on Wayland sessions from the logon screen. One thing to mention here is that Cinnamon's new Wayland session apparently supports an experimental fractional scaling for high DPI screens via the Scale Monitor Frame Buffer GTK option. Apart from the experimental Wayland session, the Cinnamon 6.0 desktop environment also introduces an updated sound applet with support for Telegram desktop for audio players that don't have seeking support, and a new shift plus middle click action, as well as a new option to always show the input switch. And then support. Go ahead.
I'd just like to point out that I said the Cinnamon experience was surprisingly good. I mean, it's still kind of buggy.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
There was some issues with input. So I think I couldn't even get it to choose the correct keyboard layout.
I've heard that there are things that are just not there yet. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The things that aren't there at all.
But I agree to go from saying we don't know when we'll support it to literally, well, it's in the next release. It's not ready, but it's there. It's like, well, wait a minute. you said you didn't know. Obviously, you were further along.
I was just surprised, like considering how it is. It's rather recently that we heard they were beginning to work on this.
Yeah. Right.
It's not. I think it's less than a month ago I heard it for the first time, and so just being able to boot it up and log in on a Wayland session, I just thought it was surprising. And
I do the. I'm part of the Mint cast, and we chat with Clem in Discord, and that was one of the questions I asked him was about Wayland, and he said he didn't have a really good answer, and then all of a sudden, like 2 weeks later, it's like
it's there.
Okay, well, I guess he likes to be sure. That's okay. I don't mind that.
They work really fast.
Yeah. Well, they actually do. They're one of those Linux distributions that has a decent amount of income. I mean, they're making tens of thousands of dollars a month, which is, hey, if you're supporting a development team, like that's not too shabby in the open source world. So, And also, Cinnamon has been accused of being a lot of like technical debt bloat, kind of like old, unmaintained code. If you go on GitHub, you see a lot of that where it's like, well, this hasn't been updated in 5 years. And it's like, well, things get changed as they needed to. But the fact that they will respond and, carry development forward means that the project is far from dead. I mean, I think a lot of that's just drama, but anyway.
Yeah, I think that too, because just because it isn't updated doesn't necessarily mean that it's old. And I mean, people who talk about like these things being bloated or spaghetti code and that kind of stuff, there's some dramatic element to it. I'm not sure if it's.
Listen, there has to be a news cycle. Even in Linux, there has to be news, right? So
it's like Linux Opera.
Yes.
So just to clarify the difference between Mate and Cinnamon, Mate is GNOME 2 continued, and then obviously there's been improvements since then. And then Cinnamon is GNOME 3 forked at when it started, and then they've been working on that. And then, if you remember, they brought in a newer version of Mutter to give it a better performance recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they actually do, between any given release, they actually add not a lot, but several quality of life type things. So a lot of times you'll see, GNOME updates, Plasma updates, and yes, of course, there's a lot of stuff that's happening, a lot of codes being changed, but in many cases, like I look at the release notes and I'm like, okay, yeah, great, but like none of this is particularly impactful for me. Whereas when Cinnamon comes with a new version, there's almost always something. Like I remember a few releases ago, they added, this is something I've always done, is I disable my touchpad whenever I'm using an external mouse. And a lot of systems just don't make that easy on you. You have to use either some kind of esoteric command or there's some kind of toggle that doesn't ever really work right. And in Cinnamon, there's just an option for it. Literally, you just check a box and it's like, oh, wow, thank you. That actually makes my life easier. So, and I always find that there's just each release with Cinnamon, there's just something good there for me. Nothing huge, not reinventing the wheel, but just something that makes life easier. So, privacy is priceless. Go ahead, Sean.
And hey, it still has a system tray. Yay.
There is that too. You're right.
There's that. Yeah.
And icons.
On the desktop or not. Depends on
wherever
what you
want them. Icons, wherever you want them. You want icons, you got icons. Yeah. I have been
They made Warpinator, right?
They made what?
As well?
Yes.
I think the Linux team made Warpinator. Yeah, I thought Warpinator is like damn cool. Worth checking out. It's super easy file transfer.
Yeah, stuff like that. I think they get enough feedback from their community that they just take it seriously and they say, okay, what have people been asking about? And let's see what we can do to make their lives easier. I love that.
Maybe it's our listening to people like complain about GNOME and not having that. And they're like, yeah, we got that.
Could be. Absolutely could be. No doubt.
One tip when reading the blog for Linux Mint, make sure to read the comments when Clem responds to the comments, because you get a lot more info that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got you. All right. Let's see. Privacy is priceless, but Signal is expensive. From signal.org. This is their blog. Signal is a empty bracket, nonprofit, so I'm guessing that's like the 501(c) or whatever. Unlike almost every other consumer tech company. Since launching in 2013, the Signal protocol, our end-to-end encryption technology, has become the de facto standard for private communication. That's a big statement. Protecting the contents of billions of conversations in WhatsApp, Google Messages, and many others. Okay, they backed it up. We estimate that by 2025, Signal will require approximately $50 million a year to operate. And this is a very, very lean compared to other popular messaging apps that don't respect your privacy. Current infrastructure costs, as of November 2023, approximately $14 million per year. The cost of registration services for verifying phone numbers when people first install Signal or when they re-register on a new device currently averages around $6 million per year, so that's up to 20. To sustain our ongoing development efforts, about half of Signal's overall operating budget goes towards recruiting, compensating, and retaining the people who build and care for Signal. When benefits, HR services, taxes, recruiting, and salaries are included, this translates to around $19 million per year. Holy cow. So,
who's paying for this?
It's a good question. I mean, if everybody's... So they created this standard, right? The de facto standard for private communication. And if it's what's being used by WhatsApp, Google Messages, and many others, and there's no reciprocity of like them funneling money back, then this is another example of, major corporations benefiting directly from open source. And yes, they're maybe adhering to the license, but I swear there has got to be something built in for compensation. That you can't just keep going on like this forever.
They must be. I mean, that money must come from somewhere, right?
I mean, maybe venture capital. I don't know, but how are you ever going to monetize Signal?
The founder gave it a lot of backing for it, and the hope is that eventually it will stand up on its own without needing money from that source. As far as the standard,
I am so on Signal. I'm not paying anything.
Sorry?
I'm on Signal and I don't pay anything at all.
I know. There's no requirement to pay. It's just a donation.
So how can it stand on its own?
Well, eventually enough people will donate to the project. That's the hope.
Oh.
And then that it will eventually stand up on its own.
Eventually Magnus will donate.
So
is that the plan?
Maybe.
Who knows?
That's a shaky business plan for me, man. Maybe people will donate.
I mean, it could be crowdfunding. Do they have like a crowdfunding page or
I
something?
don't think so.
No.
Yeah, no.
Kickstarter. It could do it. Yeah.
You have to hope that there is some, again, corporate sponsorship, stewardship. It isn't even sponsorship; it's stewardship. It's really like, okay, here's this key component to our software, this protocol that obviously there are engineers involved with maintaining that and fixing bugs and keeping it secure and all the rest of it, and that's not free. And those are highly skilled people that have a depth of knowledge in a field that is critical that they keep ahead of things. And if you're asking them to do it out of the kindness of their heart, like all the years I've been with open source software, and the fact that there is no way, and if that's truly their business plan, where it's like, well, hopefully we can monetize it, like you got to have something better than that. So I don't know.
I'll tell you something that worked for me. Mumble is an open source VoIP client and server, and I guess Murmur is the server, but on the App Store there is Plumble, which is also open source and it's free, but it comes with a gray icon, and if you buy it, I think it's something like $2. I'm not sure what it is now. You get this kind of nice looking blue icon, and I bought it. So I'm not saying that's going to fix StrawPoll's problem, but that's the kind of like quirky little things you can do that are surprisingly effective without sacrificing all the features
I just
being
figured
available.
it out. What they need to do is, for people who pay for it, you get a blue bubble. And then for the people who don't pay for it, you get a green bubble. And then only the cool people will have the blue bubble, like Apple iMessage, right? And then all the plebes.
Classy.
Yeah. So
I would disagree. Then it has to be an RGB addressable bubble.
Oh.
And then you'll have mass adoption right there.
Like real time? Like you can have like a rainbow effect, or you can have a strobe.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hook it into open RGB and you're golden. Right there.
Oh goodness. I can tell it's almost 10 o'clock.
So I just wanted to clarify one thing about when it says that de facto standard. The way Signal works, it's all out in the open. It's all open source. It's all open protocol, and it was created, and then WhatsApp and Google, they had nothing to compare to that, so they were forced to adopt Signal's approach in order to compete with Signal, in order to offer a comparable service. Now, that doesn't mean Google Messages and WhatsApp is equivalent to Signal, because we don't know how it's implemented. They say they use the same protocol. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
You can also charge for like value-added features. Like, here's a random example. You can use WRTC or WebRTC, sorry, to render in a Google Cardboard mode what comes in over video. So what Magnus was talking about earlier with his robot, you could have somebody who just holds up their phone and it's sending the camera feed through Signal, and then on the other hand, the client renders it in cardboard mode, and you can just put it on instead of see in VR what that person is showing you with their camera.
Wow.
Like all sorts of like cool, quirky little things you can just add as DLC. Like, I don't know what to call it, but
it's a good idea.
Yeah, there's value-added stuff that you can do.
Well, and I still think the idea of, the model of providing support and having adoption in the enterprise space, what's up, babe?
They didn't have the brand you like.
Love you too. So yeah, like there are ways to support, the business, I think, $50 million, man. that's not nothing. And that's just breaking even. So we're not even talking about having a profit there. So, oh my. Well, have we solved the world's problems in 2 hours? Is it all better now? Okay, good.
It's all done. Let's
feel-
just go to
still don't have
Palestine
my-
and Israel and say we've solved the peace.
Well,
They can
that's
go
not
have
so
Still
their
have a
close.
global mouse position.
fine.
No politics, please.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that in the Thunderbird blog for last year, Thunderbird
Mm-hmm.
is one of the biggest projects in terms of donations, and they approximately had 300,000 daily users that contributed $6.4 million last year.
Okay. And I could see Signal outdoing that in terms of daily users, but I don't know.
You know, not once have we touched upon OpenSUSE this podcast, and I think we should.
All right, fine.
So
That's not good. Nate won't let us do this again if we don't.
I know you're right. You're right. Go
well,
ahead.
at least Nate won't.
Let's hear it.
At least Nate won't. I mean,
How much did he
OpenSUSE.
pay you to do this?
That is an undisclosed
Okay,
amount
okay.
of
All right,
information.
fine,
So
fine.
there you go.
All right. So just saying OpenSUSE, that was good enough. We don't have to go any further than that. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's pretty much the whole experience of OpenSUSE is,
Gotcha.
hey, try OpenSUSE. There you go.
Right on. Love it.
We got Yast. That
All
was a
right.
bonus right there.
Well, I think we're going to go around the horn here and wrap this thing up. It's 10 o'clock. So we've had some folks jump in after the fact that didn't get a chance to say anything. So anything going on with you, Swift, or you just want to say goodbye, or what's going on with you?
Pretty much, I like when you brought up about Mate. I've always been fond of that. Just using it because I got started on GNOME 2 and I like having that familiar kind of setup. I really appreciate having that option versus just being thrown into something different that I don't even like.
Now, do you run the GNOME 2 layout where you have the four corners and that sort of old Ubuntu style, if you remember that, or do you use a different layout?
Back far. I use it on Linux Mint and I never really adjusted it.
Okay, so you're using like that default layout that they give you. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
GNOME
not-
2 was that muscle memory thing where when you used it, at least I remember using it on Ubuntu all those years ago, and because it has different pieces in different corners, like you would know, okay, I go down here for this and down there for that. And yeah, I was lost for a while without that because you just get used to it, and all of a sudden they're like, you can't have that anymore. I'm like,
Right. I hated it.
yeah.
It's like I was just getting really used to using Linux and then you pull the rug from under me and I gotta try to do something different. So I was like, okay.
And especially because GNOME 3 was nowhere near being ready.
Oh.
Not even close. So anyway. Oh my. All right. Well, nice to see you here. Thanks for joining in. Ulfnick, you got anything you want to throw in last minute?
It's just another completely random thing. No, I'm all out of random things. I'm afraid.
I don't believe you for a second.
Yeah. I'm trying to be kind.
Okay. All right. Fine.
Yeah. I think that's it. I'm all randomed out.
Okay. Save it for next week then. All right. Magnus, it's great to see you. Thank you for taking us through your current events and your experiences with Plasma 6 and Cinnamon 6 as well. Interesting. Little parody there. Anything you want to end on? I don't know if you do anything.
One
that you want us to
small
take a look
news
at,
thing is I was like the Nouveau development with Vulkan is positive as well. They recently released a new Mesa version with a full Vulkan compliance.
Wow.
And that's also cool.
That's
and,
really
with
cool, actually. Yeah.
With the open sourcing of the NVIDIA drivers, there's a chance that they can have the reclocking issues going on as well. So maybe the hope that Mesa can actually run on modern NVIDIA hardware is there's a glimmer maybe in the future. That's nice.
Hey, it's better than it was for a number of years, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's a
I
good
mean
thing.
it does look good. So that's another thing. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, Vince, are you still there?
Hi,
Hi. You did contribute. Good for you.
how
I'm
are you?
proud of you. How are you? I'm good. Anything you'd like to say or add?
Thanks, Eric.
Excellent. Well done.
It's been great. No, it's been wonderful.
I
I've
can
been
always
eating
count
half
on
the
you,
time.
Vince.
Like I've been sitting here watching you guys
It's
and
fine.
listening.
It's fine. I recorded this earlier, and I've been eating the whole time too. I'm using AI right now. This is all AI.
Wow.
Yeah, it's impressive, isn't it?
Prove
All
it.
right.
Show us your hand, and I want to see six
Yeah,
fingers
right.
if it's AI.
I watched a video on that last night about why it can't get it right, and it's mainly garbage in, garbage out, which I find fascinating. So, Mr. Grubbs, are you working on your keylogger as we speak?
I'm doing a whole lot of nothing. I'm just sitting here.
Listen, I
twiddling my
heard
thumbs, man.
from a reliable source that you were keeping warm today because there was snow on the ground.
That's right.
You were going between the living room and the you had a human heater and a computer heater. You had the best of both worlds there. So awesome.
Yeah, I'm doing stuff. I just don't want to share it. How about that? No.
Fine. Be that way.
It's all good.
All right, man. Good to see you. All right, Sean. What do you got, my man? Anything?
Oh crap, I'm up. Yeah, just brought a few news bits tonight. Been working a little bit in FreeCAD.
Nice.
And
what are you designing?
Mostly this week I have been designing some fan shrouds for 120 millimeter fans that were way too white. So
gotcha. Cool.
Still have white on the inside, but kind of blacked out the whole exterior of the rest of the fan.
That's so cool. Are you self-taught with that kind of stuff? You just sort of had the need and figured it out, or?
I had the need and figured it out. My first choice, and I know Nate would be like cringing in the corner when I say of CAD software is OpenSCAD, because I am a developer and that's just how my mind works. Where I can just like program everything, send it to render, and see, oh my god, that is nothing like I want it to be.
Trial and error, man. That's the way it goes. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, have a good week. We'll see you again next week. Eris, anything with you, brother?
No.
Got it all out?
Since Nate's not here, I'm gonna say, what are we doing next week?
Well, I was getting to that.
Okay.
But no, since you asked.
So next poll question should be about what CAD software you prefer.
Oh, jeez. I'm not going to have an opinion. I don't know the answer to the question.
Autodesk and Banner.
Yeah, whichever one you like. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Yes, next week, according to the notes, is an application appetizer snaps edition. We're supposed to talk about confinement and how they work. So there you go.
My bad. I'm sorry. I suggested that.
How dare you?
So we're all testing out snaps? Is that what it is?
Well, I think the idea is that having information about getting some information about the background behind them, why they do it, how they do what they do, why they're interesting or valuable, and then I guess we'd ask, like, do people use snaps? If you do, what are you using them on, or what do you use? Even though I don't use snaps on the desktop, I love them on the server. So, I mean, I think snaps have a pretty interesting story because of that, because they are both server based, and that's actually where they kind of got their start, and being extended out into the desktop space, and the how they're helping Canonical take care of dealing with software across multiple releases. And so I think there's a lot of interesting stuff about them, and sort of the storied history of performance and just all this stuff. So I admittedly don't know as much about snaps as I probably should. So hopefully next week will be educational. But as far as takeaways or homework, yeah, I don't know that there is really any.
Ironically, NixOS does not support snaps. So even though I suggested the topic, it's like my experience directly with snaps will be like, they exist.
Well, then maybe you'll learn something too then, right? That'll be good.
Yeah,
that's a good thing. I don't know everything. I mean, it's nice to have you guys here to fill in the gaps. So that'll be good. All right, Dan. Dan does nothing with Linux. He comes
not
here.
A thing. No, never.
He doesn't ever like do any kind of podcasts or participate in anything. He doesn't like develop or support anything.
Hey, I just like coming and hanging out with you guys. It's fun.
Just like, what do you do, Dan? No, come on.
I don't know, but it's interesting that you brought up the snaps thing, because we did stir up the controversy a little bit there in the last Linux user space episode, lus.sh/409. If you want to catch that, we had some other topics in there too, and a little bit of feedback. So that was a good show. Yeah, Leo says I'm a Windows guy. Absolutely not really on purpose ever. Yeah, and we talked about Ubuntu last week, so I'm not gonna hawk on that too much. Although lots of good stuff coming in 2404. That's gonna be a good time. Yeah, Linux user space. We're exploring GNOME, and we're gonna have the history episode of that coming up. We'll record that next week, and so that'll be exciting. We touched on a few things here in the show tonight that I'm sure will come out, so that'll be good. Yeah. Other than that, I really do like coming to hang out with you guys. You're a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we love having you, no doubt. You're one of those people that I've been. We have like a direct line of communication through this and Big Daddy Linux, and all the way back to the beginning of all this stuff. So
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Very cool. All right, have a great week, Jinda. What do you got, my man?
Yes. The only thing I did this week was I actually got sysd to work on MX Linux because I wanted to run WirePlumber. That's the only nerd.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's the only nerd thing.
Yeah, that's the only thing I did this week in Linux, pretty much.
Gotcha. You just jogged my memory on Calamari's installer for EndeavourOS. They give you a choice of your boot option. Do you want system deboot, grub boot, or none? I forgot about that. That was the other thing.
Really?
I've never seen that choice before, but okay.
Wow.
Yes, they're trying to switch to system deboot, but they're not going to make you do it. You can still pick grub if you want. So
okay,
pretty cool. All right, that is all of the last goodbye type things. We mentioned next week being Snap Appetizer Edition. Bring your topics for next week. As you see, we always have a main topic, but obviously if you have anything you've been doing that's interesting or you'd like to talk about, feel free to bring that with you. For housekeeping, in December, we're going to take a look back in review of the distributions and applications we've used, as well as some of the various topics and polls over this year. If anyone has anything they want to rehash, this is the time to do it. And there are discussion suggestions, distro suggestions, application appetizers, and poll ideas, any of that stuff that you got. I'll fill in for Nate since he does Linux Saloon blatherings on cubiclenate.com. When he releases the shows, he makes some commentary on CubicleNate as well. If you don't know, cubiclenate.com, he posts all of his sort of musings on different technologies and things he's experimenting with. It's varied and interesting. There's always something cool going on there. I subscribe to the feed so that whenever there's a new story, I don't miss it. Definitely worth checking out. Let's see. I skipped everything else. I did a terrible job of following the notes. Sorry, Nate. And then, yeah, I guess for my part, I am on a bunch of different podcasts. Like I mentioned, Mintcast, Linux OTC. I do this stream. I do Linux Lugcast, which is another stream. Distro Hoppers Digest, which is another podcast. So kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff. And obviously, if you listen to any of that stuff and have feedback from me, please let me know.
Oh, one more thing.
Yes.
You're on the Atlanta Linux users thing.
Right. Yes, that's true. Yeah, on Sundays, 3 to 6, AtlantaALE.org. Pretty cool. They have just a bunch of people sitting in, and then they provide tech support usually. They talk about current events too, but tech support a lot of times, which I think is neat. So, all right. Well, Linux Saloon is a part of the Tux Digital Network. Check out more great shows at tuxdigital.com. I want to thank all of you for your support, however you do it, being a part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting and the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts the personal back into personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time,